Hi folks, it's John from lastchanceautorestore.com. I'd like to share with you another update. This is the 1950 Dodge half-ton step-side truck. In earlier videos we shared with you where we had it up on the chassis. We looked at some of the areas on the truck in terms of the cross member that had some rust holes in it. We had quite a bit of seepage and oil leaks, and then we had some leaking in behind the brake drums, which we suspected may have been wheel cylinders. So now we've got a little more progress. We had a big chore, not only taking the drums off, but also with the steering box assembly and the column. So basically, instead of bouncing around, I think we'll just start here at the back. So we've removed, you can see now we have the new proper shocks. If you recall in an earlier video, the shocks were one of the concerns. They had an old style with an outer spring, and then if you recall they had big clamps, muffler clamps at the bottom and the top trying to hold the shocks in position. Totally incorrect, and certainly doesn't belong on a truck this nice. So they've been removed, and we've installed these nice gas charged shocks that are made specifically for our application for this 1950 Dodge. So now that we have the rear shocks in place, Dodge is notorious for having major problems removing drums. It's just the design of these front and rear drums. So it was quite a chore to remove them, and these drums have not been removed for quite some time. So we have the drums off now, and you can see there's quite a buildup of rust on the inside, and you have some heat marks or some hot flashes and quite a bit of corrosion on the outside. So you can see this shinier area with all of this pitting. That's where the actual brake shoe rides on the drum, and I think the camera can pick it up. So most of this corrosion, I'm pretty sure it can pick it up here with all the heavy scale, and the edges are quite rough. So we've got a lot of buildup of rust. Some of it is probably from sitting, and then once the truck sat for a while and then the client took it out of the garage and went for a couple little short drives, that would create some of the buildup of rust just from being inside. But these drums haven't been off for quite some time. They were a major chore to remove, and it's just the style. They're pressed in, and they rely on a little keyway to lock it in place. And then they have this alignment pin. So with that keyway, and when it presses on, this hub is a tapered hub, and it's a very, very difficult procedure, and a lot of talking to the drum to persuade it to come out or to come off. So we have the drums off. We'll take some measurements because every vehicle has specific measurements in terms of safety standards for the thickness of the shoes and the thickness of the drum. So we just we removed the drums because what we wanted to do is not only check, because there's a lot of noise inside the rear drums when the vehicle was rolling, but we also, in the previous videos we shared with you, there's quite a bit of fluid that was leaking not only through the back but onto the rim and onto the ground. So I suspected it was wheel cylinders, and so far we'll have to do further inspection, but most of the leaking is coming from these rear axle seals. And that's another indication of the drum hasn't been off for quite a while, because you can see there's quite a pool, and that the axle fluid, the seal that's in behind here, the axle has thicker fluid, and for that much fluid to come out and seep down and around, and also on the back side of the axle and running down the back and into the rim, is a clear indication of not being dealt with previously. So you can see someone has put anti-seize, which is great. You can see this silver-like material on both the clips and behind the shoes, and they have this silver anti-seize material, both pivot points at the top and the bottom, but we have a lot of seepage and leaking, and then there's some saturation on the actual shoes. So we're going to have to do further inspection on the shoes, the measurement of the drums, and then we'll have to locate these axle seals, because we'll have to clean everything and replace the seals to stop the fluid from leaking, and then we'll take a closer look at these seals, both top and bottom, for the wheel cylinders. So that is kind of where we are with the rear. And then if we come along to the front, excuse me, we now have redone or replaced this steering box. So I think the camera person, just tricky to get in here with under the hoist, but you can now see we have the steering box. So the other box was removed and the whole column and everything came out, and I'll just show you what it looks like, because this one is actually the original housing and we replaced the guts. So we were able to find another steering box and shaft assembly, but the bolt pattern going to the frame was different than this 1950, and it came out of a 1950 truck. So if we just kind of back up and turn around, I can share with you this steering column. So between the two, we were able to rebuild what we have. So the reason why we had to work on this or replace this, you can see this is just the housing, but what was happening is everything was excessively worn. So the bearing and seal at the top was almost non-existent, which gave you that loose feel at the top, but most of it was at this bottom end. This worm gear, which you can't really tell just by looking at it, but the worm gear, so as you turn the steering wheel, someone had wire wrapped around it to try and take up the slack or the worn rings between the two. So as you turn the steering, it's one worm gear against the other, but there was so much play that it was really sloppy and to the point where it was not safe. So we basically took both of them completely apart, and then we reconstructed the original one, and we lucked out because all of the internals and all of the bearings and seals and worm gear were identical. It was just the housing and the bolt pattern of the housing that was different. So it was a different application, I think, in this particular case. So we have that, which was a major safety issue in our opinion. We have the steering now solved. We also have the shifter concern solved. So they had, and once everything is back off of the hoist, we'll share with you the shifter, because we had a problem with the shifting not going up into first and popping into reverse, and there's quite a few things going on. So now we've repaired all of that, and it was a different location. You actually put the bracket in backwards to hold the shifter, and then we reworked all the linkage. So I'm quite confident the shifter and the front steering play is all solved. So now we're just going to deal with the rear brakes and the rear axle seals, because we have the shocks now done. And then once it's off the hoist, we'll take it for a road test, and then we'll see where we're at. But lots of progress on this Dodge. So it's a 1950, quite a rare truck actually, 1950 Dodge half-ton. And I thank you for watching. I'm John from lastchanceautorestore.com.